Good
But
morning.
the camera will move to see it, to show him when he speaks, so I will keep silent.
Good morning.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ambassador Leiter, for joining us. Good to see you. Good to see you. I just had Coach Bruce Pearl on, and I'm going to introduce you in just a minute, but he was going to give a shout out to our group here. These are all of our incredible supporters and ambassadors for Israel on this call. Bruce, go ahead.
Well, good morning, Ambassador, and good morning to everybody on the call. I can just tell you, as your chairman of this amazing organization, and as an American Jew who loves his country and is so proud of his ancestral Jewish homeland, it's just nice to know that I am not alone, that we are not alone, and that your support and the work that you're all doing for USIEA is making an enormous difference. So, Heather, please introduce our honored guest. And Ambassador Leiter, we're so lucky and blessed to have you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and just for all that are on the call, thank you for joining this morning. And most importantly, thank you for being on the wall, present, observing, and preserving Israel and the United States in the midst of this war. We just could not be more grateful for the incredible support and the care and the concern at this important time. And we have the privilege, the great privilege of having Israel's ambassador, Yechiel Leiter. And I don't have words to describe this man because he has had a long relationship with the state of Israel. Of course, was the advisor to the former Ariel Sharon, the famous prime minister. And then on from there, he just has had a long life of service to the state of Israel. And now most recently, of course, has been the ambassador amid the wars. He's going to come out of this sort of like a war hero. And certainly his son, who participated in the Gaza war, who fell there early on, is just, an incredible sacrifice, of course, for this ambassador and his wife and family to be serving at this extraordinary time. And Ambassador, we want to give you the floor. We're looking forward to your updates. Everybody is very keen on the news, so looking forward to hearing your inside scoop. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's good to be with you this morning. I'm going to apologize at the outset that I can't spend as much time as I'd like with you, an hour or two, outside the operations room here. And, generally speaking, the job of the Israel ambassador in Washington is always quite busy because I'm the linchpin between Jerusalem and Washington. But when we're engaged in a war together, that becomes all the more intensive. And I've just been joined by the deputy ambassador, who came just 3 weeks ago and joined me, Neville Barhad. So I'd like to recognize his presence as well. So I'll say a few brief words of introduction, and then I'd like to leave time, most of the time, for questions and try to relate to the things that are of most interest to you. So first of all, what led up to this? There's a lot of talk about imminent, not imminent. You all remember after the 12-day war in June, we all became etymologists, right? What does obliteration mean, right? So now we're all etymologists about what does imminent mean. And just let me say a few words about this. We live in a digital age and everything works by sound bites. So you need to find the word and the sentence and to describe an entire process and things that are deep, and it doesn't always work. So what happened in the 12-day war is we set them back dramatically and to a certain point obliterated their program. The problem is, as the president said immediately after the 12-day war in June, stop now. Don't go back to what you were doing. And the minute it was over, they went back to rebuilding, reconstituting their nuclear weapons program and enriching uranium. Not only did they go back to enriching uranium, they also went into a mode of developing more ballistic missiles at a hurried pace, so that a frenzied pace, really, because they wanted to get to a point where they could develop. They were now developing 100 ballistic missiles a month. They wanted to get to a point where they could develop 300 to 400 ballistic missiles a month, reach a level of 7,000 missiles in 2 years. And what that does is the thinking behind it is that it can overwhelm even a multi-layered missile defense system. So we have this multi-layered system. We have our own Iron Dome and David's Sling and the Arrow system, plus the American THAAD and Aegis systems. So we keep 88 to 90% of the missiles out. And that's when we're not overwhelmed with hundreds of missiles at one time, just dozens. So imagine if they were shooting hundreds of missiles at the same time, which was the idea. It would completely overwhelm the system, and it wouldn't be just 10 or 12 or 15% getting in, it would be 40, 50% getting in. And look at the amount of damage they're causing now with these ballistic missiles. So immediately after the June war, they went into this ballistic missile program. They went full speed into enriching uranium again, and they wanted to build these new installations because they learned from the B-2s. They said, these B-2s get down to a certain level, well, we'll go even deeper. So what they started to do was prepare these production sites so far underground that even B-2s couldn't get to them. And that was clearly the program. So in our estimation, and you know, from our perspective, the president's estimation was this had to be stopped, and it had to be stopped as early as possible. And that's imminent. That's imminent because you don't wait for a ballistic missile to be in the air in order to start operations against it. That's not imminent, that's past imminent, okay? That's already going into Death Valley. So that was our estimation, the estimation of our senior partner. We're a junior partner. The United States is our senior partner. Very often the prime minister says to the president, "You're my big brother," okay? And thank God we're in this together. I think it's indicative when we talk about Judeo-Christian civilization. So here we have the two most powerful air forces in the world protecting Judeo-Christian civilization, Israel and the United States, because the Iranian Ayatollahs don't just have an agenda to destroy Israel. This is what people, unfortunately, some podcasters, you may have been, you may know some of these names. We won't dignify them with even mentioning their names, but constantly, this harangue about, going to war for Israel. These people are intent on destroying Western civilization. That's what has to be understood. And we're just the first stop because we're this Western civilizational transplant in the Middle East. If you want to destroy the West, you start with Israel, then you move forward. And by the way, we saw their ballistic missiles already have a range that hit Europe. Okay, they hit Cyprus, but they have a range that can hit Germany. And beyond that, what they want to do immediately is hold the world hostage on oil, on energy. Look what they're doing now by closing down the Straits of Hormuz and moving your gas prices from $3 to $4 to $4.50 and so on. Imagine that they had enough ballistic missiles to shut down multi-layer missile defense systems. Imagine they had nuclear weapons. Then everybody would be held hostage. And what would you do in order to close the Straits of Hormuz and say, what do you want to do? Go to nuclear war? So this is something which is absolutely imperative. And we see how they behave. They could have chosen just to focus all of their missiles and drones on Israel, but instead they lashed out at the entire region. They lashed out at the Emirates and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and even Qatar. So see how they behave. Imagine if they had nuclear weapons. And when the president tried to conduct negotiations, and he sent Kushner and Witkoff to negotiate with them, in walked their negotiators with that, that Cheshire cat smile on their face, that kind of grin, the smug grin, and said, "Oh yeah, we've got 460 kilograms of enriched uranium at 60%. If you got 60%, it takes about a week to move it to 90%. If you have zero, to go from zero enrichment to 3% enrichment can take years, but to go from 60% to 90% can take a week." Okay, so what are we going to wait for? Were these lunatics who are firing at all their enemies actually have a nuclear weapon? And what the president decided was that there would be full collaboration and planning. Before he made the decision to actually strike, he made the decision that would go into a planning stage, which took place about a month before the operation. And that doesn't mean you're actually going to implement it, but it means you're going to plan. And that's going to be one of the possibilities that you can implement. And the level of planning that took place between our two countries is unprecedented. There's never been anything like it. It's basically been, sharing everything, getting into the same room, sharing everything. And we're pretty good with intel. We on October 7th, we had a complete breakdown, but it was a one-time breakdown. It was a perfect storm. But generally speaking, we're pretty darn good with intel. Okay, I mean, if you look at the takeouts, beginning with the first 40 seconds of the operation, 40 seconds, 40 of the top leaders were taken out. Less than a minute. And it was done with precision that really is unprecedented. So our intel is very good. We're sharing all of that, everything we have. As a matter of fact, I just got a film this morning from our intel people showing how we sent on-time info to our American counterparts, and they immediately were able to take out a drone installation, which protected all of our neighbors in the region. They could have gotten off in time. So it's a very close collaborative effort, and you see the results. I mean, we have so many of these F-35s flying in the air. When the United States needs to move its assets to take care of the Straits of Hormuz, it says to Israel's Air Force, okay, you got to cover the southern flank for us, right? So you got to help us out with the southern flank so we can move our assets to the Straits of Hormuz. Until then, we were focused on Western Iran and Central Iran. The U.S. was taking care of the southern flank. We now moved more of our assets to the southern flank so the U.S. can move its assets to Straits of Hormuz and deal with that issue. And hopefully, in a week to 10 days, we're going to see it open, and that problem is going to be solved. But all told, we're moving forward according to plan. Collaboration is both in planning and implementation is unprecedented. There's never been anything like this between two countries. And people ask about the goal. So, everybody's trying to particularly journalists, are trying to present daylight between Israel and the United States. We have different objectives, different goals. Now, I'm not ruling out the possibility that towards the end of this operation, there may be a difference of opinion as to when this is over. Okay, what has to be accomplished? We can't rule that out. There's such a thing called lovers' spat. We could have differences of opinion, and that's fine between allies and friends and brothers. But right now, there's no daylight. We have to degrade them to such a point where hopefully the regime cracks. Now, everybody asks about boots on the ground, and I say, yes, absolutely, we need boots on the ground, Iranian boots on the ground. Right? Not Israeli boots on the ground, not American boots on the ground, but Iranian boots on the ground. There's 80 to 85% of the population of the Iranians hate this regime. They just have the heavy boot of tyranny on their necks, and they can't rise up against them. But if there are cracks, and we are already seeing cracks, there's cracks in morale, there's cracks in the ability to get orders through the chain of command down from Tehran to the field. There are cracks. If the cracks grow and the confidence of the population rises, together we may have a point of combustion where enough people within the army in Iran turn their guns around and say, we're not doing this anymore. So there's no science here. People say they're going to go get a degree in political science. I have a degree in political science. And I'll tell you, there's no such thing as political science. It's not a science. It's not a science. Science is in the laboratory. You take this chemical, mix it with that chemical, it has an exact outcome. There's no such thing as political science. Nobody knew when the Soviet Union would collapse. Nobody knew when the Romanians would turn their guns against Ceausescu. This is not something that you assess in a laboratory. This is something that you set your sights on. You say, this is important. This is what we work towards. And you leave a little bit to God as well, that there is a hidden hand kind of that conducts things in the world, that has a architect of history, and you do the right thing and hope for the best. It doesn't always work, but many times it does. So we have to pursue course, bring this evil regime to its knees, at least to its knees. It's not defeated altogether. We want regime collapse, and regime change has to be done by the people of Iran themselves. We're hoping that's where it's going. In the meantime, we need to breathe deep, to drink cold water, pay a little bit more at the gas pump for a period of time. I'd like to remind everybody, go back to 2013, 14, it was like $160 a barrel, not $100 a barrel, all right? The price of gas was soaring at the time. Went through a short period of time and recuperated, then the price went way down to $30 a barrel. So we need to breathe deep, get through this period, Israelis are doing it, not just paying more at the gas pump. We're spending many, many hours a day in the bomb shelters. Our people are running back and forth the bomb shelters, and they're saying, we'll do this as long as we have to. Just this time, get the job done. So please God, we'll continue down this path and get the job done for the betterment of our two countries and really for civilization. Any questions? I'd love to try to entertain your question.
That's great. Well, Ambassador, I think I'll ask the questions. We kind of collected a few, if that's okay. That was just brilliant and so helpful, just specifically hearing about the Strait of Hormuz, which a lot of people have their eyes on as we're watching the news. That does seem to be the choke point, and where they've got some leverage, and wonderful to hear the time frame that you anticipate on that, being able to have control over that situation. Very, very helpful remarks here. Thank you very much for doing that. And I wanted just to ask a question that I think all of us are interested in, which would be, as you look to the future, we want to see the prize-winning effect of a war like this. And for people, just the average person that is watching the news, for the average American, anybody in the world, what are the prizes afterward? And I guess a good question for you would be, and I know you're a philosopher, but a good question for you is, how is this war going to change the Middle East as it stands right now? And I would imagine that there's a lot of internal going on right now, just with nations kind of moving together in the midst of this war. What are you anticipating with the relationships, both good and evil? And where are we going to be at the end of all of this? What are the prizes at the end?
Well, you mentioned that I have a doctorate in philosophy. I don't have one in prophecy.
Philosophy will do. Philosophy will do for this.
So as close as I can get to prophecy, I think we're going to be in a very, excuse me 1 second, please. Okay. I think we're going to be in a very good place. Look, in President Trump's first term, 2019, 2020, we went into Abraham Accords 1.0. Okay. And suddenly we saw the Emirates, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco enter into an unconditional peace agreement with Israel. They didn't say you got to divide Jerusalem, you got to give up your Jewish communities in Judea. They went into peace with Israel. And it's been a flowering peace. We had tremendous tourism investments back and forth between the Emirates. Emirates, by the way, are really the most pristine example of how the radical states in the Middle East can de-radicalize. In 2000, the Emirates saw the Arab Spring coming, and they saw the Muslim Brotherhood gaining traction in the country, and they said, this will endanger us, and enough is enough. And they rid their entire governmental system, the education ministry, the social services ministry. They remove the Muslim Brotherhood from any position of authority. And what happened was they created a society in a few years where somebody like myself, I wear a kippah on my head, right? I'm openly identifiable as a Jew. I can walk down the streets of Abu Dhabi and feel safe. I can't do that today in London or in Paris or pretty much anywhere in Europe and feel safe. And yet, who could have imagined that in Abu Dhabi, an Orthodox Jew would walk down the street and feel completely safe? So there's a change in the air, and that's a civilizational change. And that, by the way, is the reason why of all the Arab states in the Gulf, the Emirates were hit the most by Iran, because they represent the ideological 180 degrees from what the Ayatollahs are exporting. It's a very important point here. Why do they hit the Emirates so hard? Because the Emirates represent moderation, accommodation, and the Ayatollahs represent the effort within Islam towards Islamism, which is Islamic domination, which is, no, we're not going in the direction of moderation, reform, and accommodation. We want to stick to our original plans of world domination. That's why they hit the Emirates so hard, because they're the the paragon really of moderation. If this malign influence in the Middle East is brought to its knees, that's a defeat of radical Islam, which means there's much more of a place for moderate Islam to come to the fore. So I'm not going to try my luck at prophecy. My estimation based on history is that we're going to move into a mode of Abraham Accords 2.0. And the possibility for real accommodation in the Middle East, allowing the United States to move its assets from the Middle East to the Far East. Because that's really where you need to focus. I mean, why are you lowering your focus in NATO? Because President Trump came to NATO and said, look, you guys got to raise your investment in national defense from less than 2%, first to 2%, and then to 5%. You know what Israel spends on national defense of its GDP? 7.5%, generally speaking, okay? Over the past 2 years, during this war against Iranian proxies, we're at 9%. We put our boots on the ground. We never asked the U.S. to put our boots on the ground. You know, you've got 50,000 troops in Germany. You don't have any troops in Israel because we put our boots on the ground. We're what Vice President called a model ally. We're a model ally. So if we can have greater regional cohesion, where Israel and Saudi Arabia, for example, can take care of regional security, and I'll go even further, where Israel and Iran, a new Iran, you know, the country most oriented to the West after Israel is Iran, the Iranian people. Up until 1979 and the crazy takeover of Khomeini, this was a Western society. So we'll have peace with the Iranians. We can have peace with the Saudis, with all the moderate countries that go moderate. And then the United States is able to move more assets to deal with the real issue of a regional hegemon in the form of China. Because the region will be kind of a NATO operation, we'll be taking care of the region by ourselves. So move your 40,000 troops from the Gulf to 20,000 to 10,000, just a symbolic representation, and there'll be greater regional cooperation. And of course, we can talk about, I always love to talk about an issue that I dealt with for many years in South America and in Africa, of food security. Okay, there's still 900 million people in the world going to sleep hungry every day. We haven't solved food insecurity. And yet, if you look at the innovations in Israel, you know, they call us a startup nation, but we're also the sustainable nation. We can export sustainability to countries that are dealing with food insecurity. Okay, if you take the financial resources of the Gulf, the technological resources of Israel, the human resources of Africa, we can solve food insecurity tomorrow. We just need peace. So I think that the future, get beyond, we pick our heads up above the turrets and we see in the future, it could be very.
Yeah, very, very good. And just one little fine point to that, and I'm completely in agreement as we've been engaging with the Abraham Accords, our organization has for quite some time. A fine point on that too is that the United States has not yet been able to secure our pharmaceutical supply chains, with 90% in China and in real dangerous situation going forward. So that's a future opportunity for the Abraham Accords nations. Ambassador, do you have time for one more?
One more.
Okay, I so appreciate your time. If you were just for us looking on and trying to anticipate and not knowing how long this war is actually going to last, and you may not either, but what should we look for just as the strategic turning points ahead? Like if you were to name some of the milestones that you're trying to reach, what would they be?
Well, I think that the milestones would be seeing the cracks I talked about before develop. And we have to be very attuned. And like, for example, if we see minorities in the periphery of Iran starting to take advantage of the cracks within the IRGC and the Basij and start actually taking possession of their regions and say, we're not going to be under the boot of this Iranian tyranny anymore. If we see, for example, a milestone happened on what are we, Tuesday night. There was a call for Iranians to celebrate what they call the holiday of fire. This goes back to the period long before Islam. It's a Zoroastrian holiday that the Ayatollahs forbade the Iranians from celebrating. It's a kind of they build bonfires, they jump over the bonfires, and it was a kind of very family oriented holiday where they come out to the streets and celebrate. And this has been forbidden for many years. So there was a call to do that Tuesday night in defiance of the IRGC. And many people came out. It wasn't tens of millions. It was many thousands. And that's the first sign that the obstacle of fear is starting to crack. That's a milestone. If we see certain units within the IRGC and the Basij who say, we're not going to shoot at our Iranian brethren, that's a milestone. Okay, open successfully, get the Straits of Hormuz running again, open again. That's a milestone, even if it's incremental, even if it doesn't happen all at once. Okay, if we move their drone capability, right now it's down to about 10 to 20%. We move it to 5%, they're only able to get those drones out. That's a milestone. If we see the number of ballistic missiles they're shooting drop even further, that's another milestone. So, look, the people don't understand. Iran is twice the size of Texas. Okay? It's a huge country, and it's a country of 92 million people. And they've been entrenched for 47 years. You have to understand, this is, I think some of you I can see on the call are more or less around my age. You can remember what the Soviet Union was like. You can remember what the Iron Wall was like. You can remember that iron boot of the KGB on the necks of so many people. This is a tyranny, and it doesn't crack all at once. There's over 1 million Iranians involved in the various security apparatus in the country. And that's not going to, even if you just left with 200,000 and they use brutality to quell any uprising, it's very difficult. We saw what happened in January when between 30 and 40,000 people were slaughtered in 72 hours. So, there's a certain point where the combustion takes effect, where things start to deteriorate for them and rise for the people. And that's what we're looking for in the key milestone.
That is excellent. That's exactly what we needed to hear and understand. Ambassador, thank you 100 times for taking time with us today amid the busy schedule. We wish all of you well. We're praying daily for the full and decisive victory. And I do believe we have a biblical understanding that the best days for Israel are yet to come, that Israel is on the rise, and that the nations are coming. The kings will be your foster fathers. The queens will be your nursing mothers. They will come through your gates in procession. There's going to be trade routes. There's going to be gifts. There's going to be industry. There's going to be treaties. These are the days ahead, and we're getting excited about that.
Amen, Heather. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, in the middle of a Thursday morning for coming out.
I'm gonna stay and give a few moments of just going over some of these biblical history points and prophecies, and I just wanted to take a minute to do that for all of you on the call. I know that many of you are following very closely this war. Thank you for the times that you are, the time that you're putting into this, the prayer, the effort. And I just wanted to let you know that we have really before us something that is so seismic and so important for us to really understand. When we look at the future, and I've been saying this for years, as we take members of Congress to Israel, as we are making trips there, one of the most important things to understand is really what is unfolding. And when you look at your Bible, the very last things that happen are some pretty dramatic wars. What happens at the end of things is rather surprising, because if I were God, I might be doing it a little bit differently. But really, the Bible is very clear from the beginning of the Old Testament through the New Testament. We have one seamless Bible that predicts and shows what is coming. And that is going to be the decisive times, like we are in this war, where the nations are either going to align with God's purposes that include Israel, or they are not. And the decision not to is a decision to go into a place of God's judgment. And so this war, in the most real sense, at the end of it all, is a real opportunity. It's an opportunity to see God's favor. God is changing governments. He's working inside of leadership in these nations today to help them to join and cooperate with him. And I think that's what the Abraham Accords are about. Now, I don't want to sound rosy about everything, because there's a long list of nations that are not going to. They're not going to. But what I am anticipating as we go forward, that is these nations open up and they come into treaties with Israel and the United States, their nations open up. The freedom of liberty and religion and the opportunity to know God opens up. I want to just show you this map that I take everywhere with me. I'm going to put it up. Can you see it? Can everybody see it? A little bit higher? Yeah. So if you can kind of notice here, the nations that are in navy blue and light blue are the nations that are either in the Abraham Accords currently. That would be the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco. And the nations that are in light blue are the ones that are about to join. Does that make sense? They're on the cusp of stepping into those accords. But if you look at the green nations, those are the ones that are listed in one of the final wars, where God puts a hook into the nose of that green alliance right there. Take a look at them. Okay? That green alliance right there is the Gog and Magog alliance. God's going to put a hook in the nose and bring them down to destroy them as he brings them into Israel. Well, I want to just emphasize this, and you ask, where do I land inside of this? I'm taking my children to a soccer game tomorrow. I've got, things to do with my family. I've got to take care of my job here. Well, we are those that are watching on the walls. We have decided to hook into large purposes and understand what God is doing so that we can join him in that process. When you see a war like we are in right now, we understand that is a cursory event about the things that are yet to come. And that is really important as intercessors, as people that have decided to step into the story and own part of it and say, God, give me a piece of this to carry. I want to help pray for my president, for Prime Minister Netanyahu, for the nations that are allying inside of this to bring a decisive end to this regime. Well, you got some great talking points today from Ambassador Leiter. And I think that it gives us a way to go into the future, go into these next weeks, to pray diligently, to understand where we are at this time. And I want to thank each and every one of you. We just got back from Israel just a few weeks ago. We escaped by literally a couple of days. We left Israel and the war started. But while over there, as we went to the northern border, the Syrian border, and we were able to look and understand where this war front would be, that is in Lebanon today, with Hezbollah raining rockets down on Israel, while Iran also is. Israel is now amid a ground invasion. The largest to date is happening now. And that is to overthrow the capacity and the power and the will of Hezbollah. And so we're watching sort of a two-front war, not just in Iran, but also in Lebanon. Very, very important for us to understand this. A major, major operation. And the end result is to hopefully be able to have the Lebanon government have the power and the support to subdue Hezbollah and to be able to come into some sort of an accord or treaty with Israel. Well, these are ahead of us. This is what is to be. We may see this in the next few months. As I heard from Ambassador Huckabee yesterday, I don't think this war is going to end next week or the following week. I think we've got a little bit of time where we've got to decisively bring an end. One of the fine points to make is that it's the Abraham Accords nations, it's the moderate Gulf states right now that have turned where were at one time not wanting the war. Now the pressure is on our president, and they're bringing that pressure every day. Don't stop the war too early. We have been bombed. We've had missiles raining down on our civilian population. We need to see the regime fall. So there's a lot of pressure on our country to lead out front, to make the right decisions. We need our president to be supported by us, by our congressmen, by our leaders. That's what U.S. Israel Education is doing right now. We're standing in the midst of all of that, educating, encouraging, and strengthening those that are making those decisions. So I want to thank all of you for joining this call. I hope it was helpful to you. Thank you for your support, your giving, your prayer. All of that helps to make this organization work. We've got a great, great team. As you can see, we're in the media quite a bit now, using our voice out there to clarify what the real points of this war are. Thank you for your support. We sure appreciate all of you, and have a great day.